Okay guys, next video is why Cid Kageno is the most OP Isekai protagonist. Eminence in Shadow. Cid Kageno is explained. Like I said, he is the most, literally most. He has already knowledge of all the weapons, martial arts, anything. The main thing that can only stop him is being the nuclear atomic bomb. Yeah. True.
Out of all the isekai protagonists we've ever talked about, Cid Kageno might just be the most overpowered out of all of them. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the strongest in terms of overall power, but when it comes to what constitutes an overpowered
he's not
character,
the most
Cid takes
strongest.
it to the limit, then goes even further past it. He has a certain trait that most, if not all, other isekai protagonists don't even come close to having. And it's that aspect that I feel differentiates him as the most overpowered protagonist in an isekai. So, as I go over what
I think it is because of the plot revolves around him. Like I said, the plot revolves around him. That's why he's the most powerful. The plot or the story wants Cid Kageno to be the more badass and coolest character of all. And like I said, he already knows every martial arts, every powerful tools in the world. The only thing that can prevent him to be more powerful is being the atomic bomb, the nuclear. That's why he needs more power. If ever, for example, he will be transferred in the other world, like in Ain's Gold world, then he will be more powerful than Ain's Gold world because he already knows some martial arts. He already knows some things that he needs to know, being more powerful in the original world.
that is using details left out from the novels, hopefully I can convey why it is Cid's overwhelming shows of power are fundamentally different from everyone else's. But first, do you like Chainsaw Man? How about the gun-wielding waifus from the
Another Nikkei sponsor. Buti pa sila may sponsor. Sana ako din.
sci-fi RPG shooter Nikkei? Well, if you do, then you'd be happy to hear Nikkei has sponsored this video so I can tell you about their newest collaboration with Chainsaw Man. That's right, one of the most popular anime is making its way into the most popular new mobile game, not only bringing us Makima and power, but
Pero yun nga, di ba tama ba ako na yung parang inedit ata yung part ni dito ni Makima kasi natakpan ng quote.
also Himeno as in-game playable characters. So, in addition to getting to see them in a new stylized manner following Nikkei's high-level art design, you'll also bring them into the exciting battles of this post-apocalyptic world. Plus, with brand new weapons adapted from the anime itself, all three characters will have a unique playstyle befitting what you know about them, making for some pretty awesome in-game skill cuts, as well as adding even more strategic options when it comes to the pre-mission planning phase.
That's cool, nice.
So, whether you like Chainsaw Man or Nikkei's gun-wielding waifus, if you want to see them both in action in this fun arcade shooter, then be sure to use the link below to download Nikkei for free today. Not only is it just on mobile now, but you can also play cross-platform on PC with full mouse and keyboard support, allowing for a much more immersive gameplay experience. But now, let's get back to the video. To be overpowered means to overcome with superior strength. It doesn't necessarily have to refer to a person's absolute max potential, but can instead relate to that person's ability to overwhelm someone.
Yes, true. There are some ways how you can overwhelm someone, not just by pure brute strength. Katulad ng sinabi niya dito, feeling ko talaga ipapaliwanag niya dito is yung how can he projects how powerful he is, even though without touching him, without even doing something to the opponent.
So, when I say that Cid is the most overpowered, I'm not talking about how strong he is relative to other characters from different isekai, but instead the scale at which he overwhelms his opponents in battle. I'm talking about his ability to defeat them in such a one-sided manner that to even call it a battle would be an insult to what truly constitutes one.
True. He just insults them. He doesn't give him. Actually, he gives them a chance. Lahat ng opponent niya. However, he didn't give a sweat. Hindi man lang siya pinagpawisan, hindi man siya nahirapan, walang struggle sa kanya. I think mag-struggle siya, pero yung point na parang hindi, kasi meron diyang point na, even though I know it is one-sided, I know he's the main protagonist, I know na magkatatagumpay siya din, but still, katulad sa One Punch Man, we still want to know if mag-struggle ba siya or magkakaroon ba siya ng kahirapan sa isang opponent niya. Diba? Ganon din kay Cid Kageno. We want to know if this two opponent na makakalaban niya will give him a problem, will give him an issue. And then we can say hanggang saan yung power level niya, and then we can hypothesize and how powerful he is. Pero dito, he didn't give a sweat. Pinaglalaroan lang niya. Habang nakikipaglaban sila, nagano siya ng cinematic event pa rin. Nag-isip siya ng cinematic event kung paano siya mapupull off yun. Habang nakikipaglaban siya, wow! How badass it is, di ba?
Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking how Ainz and Rimuru tend to do the same, but the core of what makes them so overwhelmingly strong is fundamentally different from what makes Cid so strong. Yes, all three of these characters do have magic and abilities incomparable to anyone else in their universe, but for Ainz and Rimuru, that's just about all they have. They're overpowered because their magic build and stats allow them to be. Take away Ainz's hundreds of spells and his pay-to-win equipment, or Rimuru's ultimate abilities and his
Agree 100%. Yan yung sinasabi ko, diba? Kasi pag tinanggal mo yung power sila, abilities sa Isekai world nila, then ano matitira sa kanila? Nothing. But Cid still has the power to defeat them because he knows combats. He knows how to combat using weapons. He is the most powerful human being on Earth. Okay? He is the most powerful being on Earth. Ang tanging makakatigil lang sa kanya is just gun or a atomic bomb.
innate traits as a slime, and what you're left with are two average salarymen who wouldn't survive in a fight otherwise. When it comes to someone like Cid though, even without his magic and the equipment that stems from it, his immense knowledge of combat and mastery over every single aspect of it makes him a daunting opponent even before he was isekai'd. He applies this additional element of experience on top of all the other things that the likes of Ainz and
Okay, crazy magic, powerful skill, genius tactics, venerable leadership, and parallel talent. Wow. Actually, I cannot say if Cid has a leadership. He doesn't lead. He doesn't lead. He just cares about himself.
Rimuru possess as well, making for this overpowered character who not only defeats enemies with overwhelming magic, but also with an understanding of combat so refined that even the most experienced fighter could be defeated with feints alone. Now, I don't expect you to understand what I'm saying right away, so allow me to explain just how in-depth Cid's sense for battle goes. A deeper look into this extra layer of power that's unique to him and ensures his opponents are defeated in the most absolute way possible. Then, hopefully after, you'll acknowledge just a little bit of what I'm talking about. Starting all the way back before Cid had isekai'd himself, his passion to become stronger had led him to practice pretty much every form of combat. From karate to boxing and swordplay to mixed martial arts, Cid engrossed himself in any
Sa manga, sobrang exaggerated. Sa anime, hindi. Sobrang buff na buff talaga yung sa manga. Grabe, iba yung difference. No? Kung light novel ang pinagbasehan ng anime, well, I think I like more sa manga on how exaggerated it is. It's more funny actually.
and everything that would make him more powerful. That didn't mean he had become the greatest martial artist in the world, but if he kept training the way he did, then Cid definitely knew it was in the realm of possibility. Fast forward now to when Cid is 10 years old in the New World, and a clear disparity is noticed between his fighting style and the ones more common here. You see, with the ones he'd learned being a refined mix of the best humanity could come up with, it was only natural the more independent styles of each kingdom seem, well, rough. Since he'd spent years learning a style of fighting where movement was minimized and the best of each combat was combined to create the perfect fight, Cid could easily choose what was best for just about any situation.
True, 100%, and he can control every battle he wants. Because he already mastered the swords fight. He already mastered those things. He can control anything fight, any fight he wants.
On the other hand, with this New World's fighting techniques staying within their countries of origin, the different schools of combat haven't yet merged into their optimal versions of themselves. secret skills and hidden techniques are locked away within the jurisdiction of the country that created them, resulting in the inability for any person to refine and improve on what was taught to them. So, with Cid being in possession of this pre-existing skill set, that already puts him at an advantage over everyone else in the world.
Agreed. Pag burn pa lang sa kanya dahil meron siyang advantage na knowledge pagdating sa skill or combat niya, then everything is just a chihuahua to him.
Combine that with the existence of magic, and that small advantage turns into something completely different.
True, 100%. And if he has magic because of his slime or anything, ano bang magic na meron dyan, then he is the most powerful being in that universe.
Reason being that magic completely changes the baseline of a person's physical performance. Like, if he can now lift someone up with a single hand via magic, then everything he knows about close quarters combat is completely useless. It'd be like trying to fight a gorilla as a regular human. Say he was pinned in a mounted grapple, then he could simply flex his abs to fly through the air. If his foot was caught during an attack, then a slight activation of his leg muscles would send that person flying.
True, agreed 100%. The point here is that he has already advantage in everything, and if ever he apply magic, then it is being more powerful.
These were just a couple of the many new options that needed to be considered now that magic was added to the mix. More importantly than that though, the speed and distance at which a person would step into their attacks was completely different and harder to predict now. It was the hardest thing that Cid had to get used to. Since martial
I think when he is a child, I think that is the most harder for him because of the stat of the yung size niya compared dun sa size niya nung nandun siya sa previous world niya. So that will be one of the problems na meron siya nung initially, kasi yung size ng niya katawan niya is not equal to the size ng previous world niya. So kailangan niya mag-adjust and adapt kung ano yung skill set na meron siya, which is just, I think, just simple para sa kanya. It takes him a lot time to adjust kasi yun yung katawan na niya, pero at least naging mas malakas pa rin siya at na-adapt pa rin niya yun.
Martial arts was all about reading your opponent. Knowing their range was of the utmost importance. It meant understanding the angle, position, and distance of their attacks, which in turn allowed him to optimize his own. With those three aspects being everything, as soon as they were understood at its fullest, it didn't matter whether the person attacking was 5 or 100 meters away. Cid could now determine the exact point to stand, which would allow him to both react to an attack and land a blow right.
True, agreed 100%. Once you know the angle, distance, and how much power is it, or ano ba yung sinabi niyo, nakalimutan ko na. Dali ko makalimot, sorry. Then, no, he can adjust and gauge how powerful the opponent is, and he will adjust and gauge on how much power he will be releasing.
After, it was an optimized position defined by a single millimeter. Combine that with an adjustment to the angle of his hits, along with a slight turn to the position of his stance, and those would all be crucial differences, creating advantages for him and
What if, parang yung Sherlock Holmes yung kanina. Parang Sherlock Holmes style yung bawat pa. Sorry about that one. Yeah, like I said, what if kung ano siya, parang siya yung sa kay Sherlock Holmes, yung parang bawat niya, galaw niya, pinapaliwanag niya mentally to sa may mas cool ata yun.
Disadvantages for his opponent. It was all about creating opportunities through the narrowest of margins, not jumping in 16 feet then dashing 19 back. That was how Cid viewed combat, and he
It is more on optimizing everything, right? Saving power, energy, and everything. He saves more power in using this. It is very cool and very optimized, and everyone needs to learn on this.
He would quickly remaster it even with the addition of magic. Now, that's not to say Cid valued technique over strength, because if he was forced to choose between one or the other, then 10 times out of 10 Cid would always choose strength. Reason being that he firmly believed advanced tactics without the power to back them up was useless. When confronted with strategies that relied solely on power, speed, or reaction time though, those were the ones that Cid hated the most. They completely disregarded the very subtleties of battle that made them so amazing in the first place. So, as
True, at ilang battles ito, talaga nililecturean niya yung bawat kalaban niya na, masyado mong nagpo-focus ka sa power mo, marami ka nasasayang na opportunity, masyado kang mabagal, ganito, ganyan. Tinuturuan talaga niya. Sobrang iba kasing knowledge talaga na meron siya. Doon pala makikita mo yung advantage nila. Even though na matanda na yung kalaban niya, ganyan-ganyan. Yes, it is reasonable na mas matanda siya sa kanila. Kasi nga, naborn siya sa other world. However, if you see it on their eyes, diba, bata lang siya, no?
As Cid himself likes to put it, strength was natural but mastery required effort. And it's
Agreed, and it also applies in the real world. Strength is natural. It is natural actually, but a master on a specific job or a specific thing is an effort you need to master. An effort you need to do. You should be working smart every time, and if you want to be strong, you need to master one thing until the other, and then one at a time. And once you master one thing, then you can master the other thing and the other thing and the other thing. And then strength will comes out to you.
those words that I believe lie at the core of what differentiates Cid from every other overpowered isekai protagonist. Sure, Ainz and Rimuru and Hajime may have mastered the use of their own skills and magic, but Cid has mastered all that plus the art of combat. You see, to him, skill and expertise are pretty much everything. He allows his techniques to bolster his strength, uses his ingenuity to dictate his speed, then his reaction time allows him to scope out potential attacks. They're all aspects that remain independent from the physicality a lot of the others seem to rely on. And though that is definitely important, Cid would never screw up a fight by relying solely on that or any of the other aspects. For example, let's take a look at how he approached his fight with Grease. First, Cid walked forward and waited for Grease to take a swing at him. As soon as that move was made, not only was Cid made aware of his current range, but that was cue for a minute quantity of magic to be used to speed himself up.
True. Meaning to say, he's just explaining here on how technique is really important. Skills, nung skills, technique yan, yung kung ano yung distance, yun yung pinaka-importante sa lahat. And then after that, strength comes along with it.
He would focus the tiniest bit of magic into his feet, compress it till the time of release, then use its explosive impact to make himself faster. So, while Grease's sword was slicing past,
and that is genius actually. He masters the combat already. Like I said, before pa siya mapunta dito sa reincarnated world, he already know combat.
The target no longer there, Cid was placing himself within range for his own attacks. A slight shift in position that required minimal effort yet still provided him with all the advantage. When Cid went to initiate his own attack next, he didn't use magic to make himself faster as their difference in speed no longer mattered anymore. Since he was now on the offensive, Grease had no choice but to move in response to it, which to Cid indicated he could no longer attack anymore. One more step forward and Cid would now put both parties in a position too awkward for either to attack, leading Grease to step back.
Well, this person is just focusing on more power. The more powerful is, the more he thought that he is more powerful, but not. He's just wasting his movements.
Just like how Cid had anticipated. Even if he didn't though, just reading the shift in Grease's magical energy was enough to indicate that he was.
The thing here, Cid always destroys them. He destroys their skills, he destroys their pride, he destroys everything. Even though hindi niya na kailangan gamitan pa sila ng magic, it's just a simple swordsmanship, and simple crossbow. Nakakadax. Ala na nga. Talagang lintik kayo. Ala na, nasira na talaga yung pagkatao nyo lahat. Warrior ka, combat ka, marunong ka magganito, ganyan sisirahin talaga ni Cid din sa'yo. Talagang gano'n ang gagawin niya sa'yo, papamukha niya sa'yo na walang kwenta at mahina ka nila lang.
Heading there. So, this time Cid had manipulated the battle by using his own position to affect his opponents, once again creating a clean opportunity for him to strike without any risk to himself. Now, I know Grease really isn't the best opponent to highlight an overwhelming difference in power, but as the first instance where we get to see how Cid fights, it sets the foundation for how battle is perceived by him. It isn't just this competition to see who's stronger, but instead a dance of tactics in which one must overcome the other. Greece was
Agreed, hindi siya katulad ng ibang mga anime katulad ng Dragon Ball na mas malakas ako sa'yo, mas malakas yung ki ko sa'yo, pak. It is more on the tactics and techniques na meron siya. And pinaliwanag yun sa anime.
Was definitely stronger than Cid was here, but because Cid understood exactly what was happening, Greece could only feel as if he was getting toyed with. He literally felt he was being overpowered, much to the point that he knew he could only wait and accept his death.
And the point here is just using just simple swordsmanship. It doesn't use any magic yet. So it is just a stepping on his pride.
Death. Now, the battle that truly highlights this fundamental difference in his approach to combat is that one-sided fight against the Witch of Calamity, the literal strongest woman in recorded history who Cid beat just as easily as he did with everyone else. What makes this fight different from all the others though is that in this one he actually had to try a little bit. Not in the sense of relying more on his magic and his OP abilities, but rather through greater insight into what his opponent was capable of. It's an in-depth analysis that he likes to refer to as a conversation.
The thing is, napansin ko nga dito na sa Eminence of the Shadow, he has different technique in his different opponents. Different technique, skills, and different opponents na nahalabas niya. Sobrang iba yung style na binibigay niya sa different opponents niya. That is very cool of Cid, if you will notice.
Whenever Cid finds himself facing a worthy opponent, he likes to treat the battle as this different type of form for it. You see, every little thing from a shift in gaze to the position of the feet were all tells that indicated something about the opponent he was facing. They were these tiny cues that each held a very specific meaning to it. So, the more of these little things he observed, the more meanings he could determine from them, and that in turn would lead to figuring out how best to deal with them. It was the very core essence of what fighting was all about to him. Only the most skilled in combat could perceive purpose in the smallest of actions, then use that knowledge to prepare a superior response to it.
Wow, that is deep actually. Only the most skilled could perceive purpose in the smallest of action. Then use that knowledge to prepare a superior response. Only the most skilled. Totoo, true. If you're skilled enough and have more knowledge to perceive the purpose of the little things, then you will be have an advantage to your opponent.
So, by thinking of it as a conversation, each person's communication skills would be their ability to read their opponent. The stronger your communication skills were, the further ahead you could anticipate, and that in turn would allow you to respond accordingly. If the other person's communication skills were just as strong, then they too could do the same.
Sorry, nakamute pala ako. So yun nga, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, ang maganda kay Cid kasi is bago pa mag-start yung laban nila, talagang si Cid is nagbibigay na siya ng psychological tactics or psychological parang pinapakita niya kung ano yung mangyayari sa kalaban niya. Tapos yung kalaban niya napaperceive na kung ano yung mangyayari sa kanya. And then they felt some kind of nervousness tsaka parang takot sa kanya. Dahil dun sa mga pinagagawa niya, little things na take advantage. Bago pa mag-start ang laban, nagkakaroon ng psychological warfare. Nagbibigay siya ng psychological warfare to doing some little things na pwedeng mapansin ng kalaban niya na and can perceive kung ano ba yung possible na pwedeng maging action at mangyari sa kanya, which is very cool. Before pa mag-start yung laban, talo na yung kalaban niya dun.
Same and anticipate prior to your follow-through and then react to it, resulting in this endless back and forth exchange in which the conversation continues until one person's dialogue becomes too much for the other. On the other hand, if an opponent's conversational skills were lacking, much like how many of them do, a dialogue would never even get started in the first place. It would just end up in one party acting on impulse until the fight ended, which to Cid couldn't even be considered a conversation. To him, that was no different than trying to end the fight with a game of rock, paper, scissors. So, whenever Cid was faced with an opponent, every time he would go in trying to start this conversation, but every time until now he would always be met with silence. His opponents would always go in trying to win on impulse, resulting in a far cry from the true type of battle he'd always been yearning for. When he does have the chance to have this conversation though, that's when we get to see just how far this gap in skill and experience truly takes him. So first he starts with observation, initially by simply staring to find those first subtle meanings, then following it up by granting the initiative to judge speed, mobility, and destructive capacity.
Actually, you can also apply this in real life. Speed, ability, destructive capacity. Not all of them are for combat, but if you will apply observation to all to around you, then you can use this to make advantage to your work, to take advantage on your studies. Just do some observations and study more and work more.
Capacity. It's a step that usually takes less time the stronger your communication skills were. Once that observation was complete, the next step was to refine his movements, and this typically involved removing unnecessary motion when dodging. Like, if he could turn full steps into half steps and 2 moves into 1, then that would directly result in a window in which a counter.
True, and it saves him time and effort. It saves him time and effort. He optimized everything. He optimized the combat he got. Because he is already top notch in terms of combat, and he is improving more and more and more and more as time goes on because lalo siyang lumalakas.
Counterattack could be made. You see, the less time spent moving to dodge meant more time for a counterattack, bringing us to the third step.
Agreed. Totoo yan, 100%. Kung titingnan mo siya maging reasonable lang tayo, sobrang totoo yan.
In which the first 2 were creating an opening for. Sure, Cid could have evaded Aurora forever, but doing that would never lead to victory. No, his dodges needed to be refined so that he could create space for a counterattack, and that was the essence of the conversation he was having. It was actually noted perfectly through the observations of Alexia. She was the first to understand exactly what Shadow was doing here. Now, for someone as skilled as Cid, the outcome of this battle was made certain all the way back at step 1. His initial observations showed Aurora wasn't as skilled at communicating as him. So, by the time the first move was even made, both seemed to understand it was only a matter of time until the battle would be decided by him.
Oh, now I understand now. Now I understand kung bakit parang hindi nakakita ng parang delusional something si Aurora sa kanya. Now I understand. Now, that's cool. This is cool.
Now, despite it being so one-sided, I believe this to be the best fight that highlights that fundamental difference I've been talking about. I mean, Cid definitely could have used any number of his OP abilities to end this right away, but
Agreed, but that's lame. No, that's lame. Cid always used the dramatic and cinematic way. That's lame, boy. That's lame.
That's never the type of fight that he's trying to go for. Unlike what Ainz, Rimuru, or anyone else does, Cid is always
True, Ainz and Rimuru just doing for the optimal thing, the most explosive thing, the most powerful thing to end it quickly. But Cid doesn't do that. He wants it more cinematic, more dramatic, and more exciting.
going in trying to start this conversation. He wants to begin this dialogue so he can beat his opponent in the most absolute way possible, achieving that
Sabi nga nila, a battle is like a communication between 2 warriors. Yun.
perfect victory is all that ever matters to him. Victory to everyone else just means defeating your opponent, but victory to Cid is something completely different. It's the process of systematically dismantling them in the most overwhelming way possible.
True, hindi lang tapakan ng pride nila, skills nila, lahat ng pinag-aralan nila pagdating sa combat nila, talagang overwhelmed lahat. Kaya I will agree, talagang Cid is the most powerful talaga na Isekai Protagonist.
A precise operation that always ends with him overpowering them both in strength and technique. So, whereas every other Isekai protagonist wins their battles through strength and power, Cid takes it a step above and bolsters all that with technique and ingenuity. He would never solely rely on the magic or skills that came from being isekai'd. No, instead he chooses to rely on himself, his refined experience with combat, which results in this level of overpowering that we only ever see from him. Thus the reason I think Cid to be the most OP character out of all of them. Once again, that doesn't mean he's the strongest, but when it comes to the scale at which he overwhelms his opponent,
To be fair, Rimuru and other Isekai OP protagonists also rely on themselves. They think all the things that they can do just to win in a battle. But the thing here is that those persons, those Isekai protagonists doesn't have any prior knowledge, combat knowledge compared to Cid before they transported to the another world. That's the thing here.
every other protagonist doesn't even come close. There's no one else who achieves absolute victory and inflicts such hopeless defeat like the way that Cid does. I mean, the guy literally
Kapag nakalaban mo siya, ala na nga na. Talagang destroy ka pati yung pagkatao mo.
beat the hero Olivier without so much as a sword or magic. He beat Anna Rose with perfect spacing and terrifying foresight, then humiliated Iris through a series of feints so intimidating she couldn't even move.
That's true. That's very, very true. To the point na lahat ng laban talaga niya very unique to each another. He has so many techniques and way on how defeat his opponent. That's very cool of Cid, and that's why this anime is really cool.
Move. Now, if that doesn't highlight that fundamental gap in combat experience, then I honestly don't know what else to tell you. It's his literal life passion to be the most overpowered. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on what I think of Cid. Whether you happen to think the same or not, I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. This was honestly just a fun little topic that I wanted to talk about. Nothing that needs to be taken too seriously, I hope. But with this now done, I'll be going back and covering Danmachi next week. So if you're a fan of that, then feel free to check out my other videos. Until then though, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao!